Hi everyone, I'm Tim O'Hanlon, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast series called Governance Exposed. It's a subject I'm extremely passionate about, and one I've devoted most of my career to understanding. But before I start, when it comes to my social media and podcasting skills, at nearly 70, this is all very foreign to me. So I hope you don't mind if I ask you to bear with me as I get into this new experience so that I can get my message out there. I speak about things that could be sensitive and describe things in my own words based very much on how I feel about things here. So please understand, this is not intended to be in any way personal or offensive. In this opening podcast, I'm going to lay out what this series is all about when it comes to governance and why it matters more now than ever before. If you want to understand why there is so much chaos, hardship, uncertainty, and loss of faith in those in charge, then you've definitely come to the right place. So let me start by sharing some of my thoughts with you about the complete chaos that's been going on for some time now across the globe. Every time I switch the news on, it's just awful. It's one horror story after the other. And I keep thinking to myself, well, it can't get any worse. It's bound to turn the corner soon. And then it just carries on getting worse. Then I listen to major leaders like Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, talking at one of those international conferences about the collapse of the world order. My immediate reaction is, it's not surprising, with the kinds of world leaders running the show today. But the deeper issue is that the mess we're in is on the heads of all our politicians, not just those in office today, but going back centuries. And the reality is, to put it crudely, shit rolls downhill. So we're in for a long, rough ride, way beyond our own lifetimes, with all the crap that's going to keep being dumped on us until we do something about it. Everywhere I look, there's conflict, instability, economic hardship, and growing uncertainty. Little wonder that politicians across the globe are taking strain and showing their true colours under pressure. And this is just perpetuating the chaos. In fairness, though, I certainly wouldn't want to be a politician today. They are just so ill-equipped to govern when it comes to the serious complexities at the heart of governance. Also, there is huge polarization today, and it's getting worse. Something that is a major barrier to progress, especially the way conflict seems to be dealt with these days. Words that come to mind like bullying, domination, and oppression. And there's no clear sense that anything is actually settling down anytime soon. Do these leaders think that by trying to wipe certain groups off the face of the earth, that future generations are not going to harbour serious anger and want revenge? History tells us that this is what we are committing to here. So how long do you think it'll be before the next 9/11? As an aside, I grew up in South Africa and was privileged to experience the incredible statesmanship of Nelson Mandela. He drove an agenda of truth and reconciliation to avert civil war between a massive black majority that had been horrendously oppressed for decades and the small white minority that represented the oppressors. I wish we had more true leaders like him around today. Coming back to what is going on today, I saw a sign that had graffiti on it the other day when I was walking my dog. Please excuse the language here. It said, "Fuck the Tories, fuck Labour, and fuck reform." And that just about sums it up for me about the three major political parties in the UK hoping to win the next election. I think, like myself, there are many of us across the globe who have lost complete faith in the political systems that govern us. Can you actually trust what the politicians tell you today? Can you rely on them having your best interest at heart? Or are they captured by big money? Are they the role models you want your children to look up to and aspire to be like one day? Hell no. Can they actually do the job they've promised to deliver on? Ever So why do you think one of the key leadership groups accountable for governance across the globe is so dysfunctional? On a more personal and pretty emotional level, how can you not feel huge despair when you see entire regions destroyed, millions of innocent people displaced, and thousands of children, yes, thousands, killed, maimed, orphaned, or left starving? Never mind the massive, lasting, and hidden damage to the mental health of every school-going child across the globe hooked on social media. Why? Because technology has advanced without proper governance. My heart goes out to every parent and all those dealing with this stress, heartache, and loss of loved ones, loss of livelihoods and possessions. For me, it's just totally unbearable to be a senior member of the generation that is to blame for much of this. It actually makes me sick to my stomach, and it just seems like humanity has lost its ability to be humane. We really have to find a way to fix this. Why are we so powerless to stop this madness? And here is by far the biggest indictment that's on all of us. Can we blame those in power for the state we are in across the globe at a local, regional, national, and international level? Because based on what I've learned, there is no way the answer is that simple. There are much deeper issues that seem quite obvious when exposed, but stay hidden and unresolved. And to cap it all, we're the ones who put these people in power in the first place. Go figure. But it gets worse. I'll show in this series that it's not just the governing bodies of political parties that run governments across the globe. It's the governing bodies of international institutions, like the United Nations, set up after the Second World War to preserve peace. How do you think that's been getting on now? The world superpowers have veto rights and just do their own thing. What kind of governance is that? Also, what about the governing bodies of state institutions that are the backbone of society, like health, education, energy, and water supply, that are constantly compromised by governments that come and go throughout the decades? And then there are the governing bodies of corporations, like the banks, that look after our money until they don't, when the next collapse happens, and get off scot-free, while the public suffer all the losses and pay for the recovery. And then there's the big tech giants that provide us with our phones, computers, and social media dependencies and addictions. And then there's the pharmaceutical companies with their obscene returns that control our health in total and keep our vices in check until we are totally dependent on them. I could go on and on. All of them are shaping how we live our daily lives. And how does that feel? It's not just you and me being shafted. It's society as a whole. When you step back and take all of this in, it doesn't feel new. And that's what's really worrying. History is repeating itself, but on a scale and at a pace never seen before. You only have to listen to thought leaders like Elon Musk about the future to get a real wake-up call about this. Think about it. Intelligent robots will replace the majority of what I call the non-physical or white-collar jobs across the globe. Not in 20 years, not in 10 years, but much sooner. This will be an exponential transformation of work as we know it. We have to wake up to the fact that technology is outpacing our ability to control it, and getting that right is a major governance challenge. I've got no problem with these giant corporations with enormous power pushing the boundaries of human advancement, but there needs to be the right governance to handle it. And that's not just on them. That would be like putting the fox in charge of the henhouse. I don't know how you see it, but I find myself thinking more and more about the future. That's because I'm nearly 70 and I've got grandchildren. And I genuinely worry that they will not have the quality of life I would wish for them in the world they're going to inherit. And that will be on us. And so here is the challenge that this entire series is based on. And that is, how the hell did we get here? And how the hell do we fix it? Because looking back over the past century, this doesn't seem like a series of one-off events that are unique to the period we are living in now. There is a clear pattern going back centuries. The same kinds of failures and resulting hardships happening again and again, just with greater velocity and intensity, as the exponentially growing power of big money has a stranglehold over our lives, and technology amplifies all the hardship that future failures will cause. The issues are increasing in magnitude, complexity, and volume that we are grappling with globally and at a national, regional, and local level. And it really doesn't serve those in power to admit they are out of control, and in most cases don't even know that it's governance that is at the root of all of this. Anyway, why would they want to do something about it unless forced to? They aren't the ones impacted. So stepping back, a phrase that comes to mind is the one that defines insanity. It says, doing the same things over and over and expecting a different result is insanity. Well, when you look at what's been happening for decades, at least the past century I've studied, there's plenty of insanity doing the rounds. And it feels like we are the inmates, locked in padded cells with straitjackets on, while the madness prevails by those in charge on the outside. It's like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, for those who are old enough to remember that great movie. So, it's not just about how we got to where we are, but how do we get out of this madness? For many years, I've worked to understand why this keeps happening, particularly at the highest levels, the governing bodies of governments, state and global institutions, and corporations. Why do those with the most power, the most resources at their disposal, and the most potential for doing good for societies keep making decisions that lead to the same massive hardship for societies over the decades? Trillions in recovery costs paid by the public, millions of deaths, and complete destruction. Surely we should be a much healthier, wealthier, and happier planet, especially given how long those in power have had the total wherewithal to achieve these aspirations, that the vast majority of the electorate would like to see for our current and future generations. I'm now going to lay bare some of the most damning issues of governance that seem almost too unbelievable for words, that are at the heart of all of this chaos. I'll surface them here briefly as examples to give you an idea of the many governance gaps that I will be unpacking in this series. I have only one thing to ask though. You are watching this right now. Just stay the course. Join me on this journey as we uncover a new way of thinking about how we are governed. And please post your thoughts along the way and share this with your network, because the reality is the only way we can make the difference is by being engaged in understanding the root causes and championing the change that has to happen. So here we go. Let me start by asking you a simple question. How would you feel if you or one of your loved ones had a life-threatening condition and had to go in for brain surgery, and there was no profession to guarantee that the person wielding the scalpel had the right qualifications and experience to do the job? That's a pretty scary thought. But it gets worse. You have to travel across bridges and through tunnels to get to the airport and fly to the hospital. But the bad news is that the engineers involved had no profession that accredited them. Oops. Here's hoping you're not in the wrong place at the wrong time on your way to the hospital. Then you get on the plane and you hear that the pilot has just qualified with a 40% pass on his practical. Fingers crossed you and all the other passengers make it to the other side. I think you can see where this is going. Let's now look at what it takes to run a country. The scale, the complexity, the financial magnitude, the number of people involved, the expertise required across dozens of services like health, welfare, education, energy, water, security, and many others. The impact on millions of lives across the country. Now ask yourself the question, what qualifications and experience does the head of the political party in power need to run the country? My response, none. That's right. It's completely absurd. We must all have a herd mentality with the collective stupidity of a 2-year-old to allow heads of state to have no qualifications and experience and be voted into power. But that's what happens. But hang on a minute, you might say. If you look at the past century, look at how many prime ministers in the UK were part of that elitist club that went to Eton and then on to Oxford and Cambridge. My response, what did they study? Political science, history, the weather, or some other arbitrary subject? Never mind the qualifications. What practical experience did they need to clock up before they could run the country? To add insult to injury, the academic institutions that are the cradle of intellectual excellence and progress do us no favors here. Why? There is no governance discipline. Rather, a fragmented and totally incomplete set of subjects across different disciplines that are an indictment on these institutions' ability to stay current or even recognize these vital strategic gaps. Let me cut to the chase. My point is that governance, that is at the root cause of all our major disasters, has no profession, no set of qualifications, and no experience required. It is a monumental, eye-watering fuck-up. I'm sorry. Just think for a moment how bad it can actually get. Is it possible for a housewife, I apologize to housewives here, to become the head of state? Answer, yes. I rest my case. But hang on a minute, it gets even worse. How many prime ministers has the UK had in the past 10 years? Possibly 6 if the current incumbent gets the boot. So what do we have here? No accredited governance qualifications, no accredited governance experience, no mandated continuity in the role. The results? A slippery slope of instability we've experienced for decades. Well, if that's democracy, defined by the constitutional right of every citizen to become a politician and get into power, then it's a crock of shit. And it's high time the rules of engagement were updated when it comes to government and its governance. But wait, can you believe it? It gets even worse. Surely all those major services, such as health, that have to deal with nationwide challenges, like the next global pandemic that we know is going to be happening, where they need to have all the necessary infrastructure, expertise, and testing in place for the next set of vaccines that can't just take 2 years to develop. These institutions need long-term plans that are at least 20-year strategies with funding that is secured. This should be the de facto standard in place to avoid the knee-jerk reactions of politicians in power handling crises. You see it often, like the wholesale outsourcing and resultant inflated costs of core deliverables beyond the capacity of a depleted civil service caused by politicians in power going back decades that failed to provide long-term strategic resourcing obligations, not just people, but money too. The harsh reality is that it's only ever going to be a priority for our politicians when the shit hits the fan. And then they'll borrow against the credit of future generations with substandard outcomes that will be the subject of years of public inquiries at our expense. Well, this surely is insanity just repeating itself over and over. But then think about it. We are asking the heads of state, locked into short-term political cycles and dependent on the fickle herd mentality of the electorate, for staying in power, and we're expecting them to manage long-term strategies. It is never going to happen. And my eyes are starting to water at the breathtaking stupidity of all of this. Little wonder that these institutions never stand a chance of flourishing, notwithstanding the incredible people that work inside them. Ask me, I know. Having helped out in the UK government during and after the pandemic, what an experience that was for me. It was humbling. We are blessed to have those civil servants, notwithstanding the stupidity of how they are governed. One last insight on long-term decision-making and strategy, which is the final death knell as a result of the short-termism of all forms of governing bodies. What am I talking about here? Let me start by asking you a simple question. What is wisdom in action? And for the purpose of this podcast, let's just focus on governance. My definition. It's the application of the ongoing collective learnings of governing bodies, captured from the practical application of knowledge applied in an ethical manner, to improve governing bodies' knowledge and decision-making. Now that's quite a mouthful, but it is incredibly important, because nowhere are the decisions at the top of organizations, short or long-term, tracked and tested for learnings that can enhance the wisdom of future governing body members. We are so far behind the curve when it comes to this kind of practice that should be capitalizing on the learnings for developing future governing body members to become wise leaders looking after our future. Governing bodies that head up governments, international and state institutions, and public and private corporations are accountable for making the right decisions that collectively direct the future of all of humanity and the health of the planet. But they are not held to account where it matters most. How good are their decisions? What did they learn? And how did they improve things as a result? That's the basis on which governing body members should be hired and fired. But once again, it's not as simple as that. But just imagine if we did capture these governing body learnings dating back decades, that we could give our AI platforms to help the governing bodies of tomorrow. As an aside, I have a vision of the governing body of the future, having an integrated governance, command and control center powered by AI that taps into all these learnings to help those in power make complex decisions with ease and speed. Imagine that. There's more on this later in the series. So here is my final nail in the coffin of the current governance paradigm or model. The most important question of all. What on earth is governance? I've spoken so much about what it isn't, but now to ask, what is it? Sure as hell it's not just a command and control center. You can have all the wisdom in the world, but without action, it's useless. So what does the governance architecture actually look like? What are the structures, standards, and practices for governance? Very different to what is in place today, that's for sure. What are the core competencies required? What is the experience that qualifies? Who audits governance? Hopefully not the Big Four, whose position is completely compromised, and who, quite frankly, couldn't manage a piss up in a brewery when it comes to governance. Why do you think there are so many failures on their watch? It's very simple. Just looking at the finances misses the boat completely. That's like shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted. Governance is the higher order risk that finance sits under. This is the rightful place for governance when it comes to audits, and its focus is on the entire governing body, not just the financial elements. Duh, it seems so obvious. So if none of this is clear, if there is no recognized specification of what governance is, how on earth do those in charge know when their governance structures, standards, and practices have veered off the beaten track? Where is the international benchmark or gold standard? Who maintains it as the world changes in all its many complexities? I'm starting to feel my eyes watering again. So think about it. No governance standard that is properly spec'd. No governance profession like you have for the surgeon or the engineer or the pilot when you're on the way to hospital. No accredited governance qualifications. No accredited governance experience. No stability for long-term strategies, and no governance audits of those who govern. Go figure. Little wonder societies are constantly shafted because of the crass stupidity that is hidden in plain sight. I'm going to stop here. My final parting thought. The ecosystem that is governance is perfectly designed to get the results it is getting. So we need a new paradigm if we don't want insanity to prevail and societies through future generations to continue being screwed over by the system. The bottom line is that the problem is not just about government. It extends to international and state institutions and major public and private corporations that collectively are accountable for the quality of life of our current and future generations. But to repeat, it is about the system that is broken, that needs fixing. It is not about laying blame on individuals. I know I've been politician bashing in this podcast, but I also keep saying that it is actually a lot more complex than that. It is actually the system we have to look at. This series is about unpacking all of this. So to finish off, I hope this opening podcast has created sufficient curiosity about governance for you to subscribe and be part of the journey that this series will take you on. That will allow you to be better informed on the subject and maybe even become part of a movement for change that is so desperately needed here. For those of you that are already on board with this thinking, having considered what I've covered here, first prize would be that you see it as a worthy cause to engage in. Right now, it would be great if you could take some time to share this with your network. In other words, play it forward. My mission to make a difference will need a movement. So the more of us that can engage in this conversation, the better chance we have of changing the madness. Thank you for listening. I appreciate your time. Let me know if you have any suggestions about my social media efforts to spread the word, because this is all pretty new to me. And make sure you play it forward. All the very best.